Brian Gutekunst said the Green Bay Packers aren't going to change their draft preferences for Jeff Hafley's defense, but then they re-signed Isaiah McDuffie. So are we sure that's true?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. The Combine came and went. We're going to talk about that today, but let's start with Isaiah McDuffie. He returns to the Packers, I guess. No, he signed a contract. It's going to be $4 million a year. And then that spurred all sorts of arguments about, okay, is this starting linebacker money and what that means? I'm kind of not interested in that, though I think it's related to the discussion I want to start with here. If this isn't starter money, and I suspect it's not, then maybe this means nothing. That being said, if he's a special teams mostly player, and he was the guy starting, and I thought this was very curious, when Edgerrin Cooper made it clear he's the starting linebacker inside next to Quay Walker, then when they were playing in base, who is the Sam linebacker? You got a Will, you got a Mike. It was, in the playoffs at least, Isaiah McDuffie, and that is a weird thing for Isaiah McDuffie to be doing because he's not built like a Sam linebacker, not even by modern standards. So, okay, that's weird. If that's what you want and need, then isn't Eric Wilson, if you're going to pick one of them, the more intuitive choice? To me, the answer is yes. Now, that being said, the Packers do just need bodies at that position. They have Quay Walker, they have Edgerrin Cooper, they have Tyron Hopper. We don't know what Tyron Hopper is at all. At all. Now, that being said, and I mentioned this on X, 58 linebackers in the NFL make $2 million. 58. Not even every, and like nickel is base. So if every linebacker made at least $2 million in the league, then we should expect 64 linebackers to make starting level money. They don't. 165 linebackers in the NFL make under $2 million. This is just not a highly valued position. Most players at linebacker are just guys. They're special teams players, they're backups. You have two guys, two linebackers who play for you most of the time, and that's about it. So $4 million, yes, it's more than most of the league at linebacker makes, but most of the league is rookie salary vet minimum guys. So, okay, what does that mean for the Packers? Well, I do think it means that Isaiah McDuffie has a chance to start right away. I do think if you're going to re-sign a player like Isaiah McDuffie, you want to reward him a little bit. It's not a good reason to upcharge on a veteran minimum, which I think is probably what he's worth, but $4 million is a flyer linebacker contract. So, and look, I know the Eagles signed Zach Bond to $4 million, but it was a flyer. It was a, hey, let's just see what he's got. That's a $4 million linebacker contract. It's not anything that out of the ordinary. But the fact that it's more that it's Isaiah McDuffie and not Eric Wilson, who is the proven special teams player, and I thought, frankly, was the better fit at Sam. Now, they're grooming Tyron Hopper. That's where he practiced and played and or that where he practiced. That was where he was training, according to Jeff Hafley. When he was playing in the game, it was usually at either Will or Mike. But so that's what makes this a little weird for me. But that's what makes me go, Jeff Hafley's fingerprints are all over this. If that's true, is what Brian Gutekunst said about, hey, and I thought he made a great point when he was asked about this and said at the combine, it is not a smart choice to build off of scheme because scheme can change so quickly. Just look at the Packers last year. They expected to be this 3-deep, 4-under team playing a lot of cover 3, and that was not who they were ultimately able to be. But I don't think that means Jeff Hafley will not have input in what this draft can look like. And if the Isaiah McDuffie signing is any indication, then he is going to have his fingerprints all over this. I take you back to 2012. The 2011 Packers defense was, if not for the historically bad New Orleans Saints, would have been historically bad. They go out. Now, Nick Perry, not outside the ordinary for what the Packers want to do, but Jarrell Worthy was. In fact, that was the last time they used a top 100 pick on a defensive tackle less than 300 pounds. A smaller, penetrating defensive tackle. Mike Daniels in the 4th round, a smaller kind of player. Look at what they do in 2013. Now, Dayton Jones was a more prototypical 3-4 defensive end. They actually changed his position. Micah Hyde, they bring in as a hybrid player. Ted Thompson, you go back and you look at some of these drafts. The 2015 draft, another great example. Demarius Randall, they bring in as a safety. He is a hybrid by intention and ultimately lands at corner because he played so well. Quentin Rollins, they draft, and man, that's one of the worst Packers draft picks of the Ted Thompson era because they felt like they needed to take the ball away more. These were guys that they drafted, ball skills, to try and be impact players. They were guys that Dom Capers wanted. And they leaned into that. The Packers have a history of doing that. Now, we've talked about what that could mean in this draft class, but I think it's important for me to point out here, especially at defensive end, okay? If you look at Packers types, and the last time we talked about this, we didn't have the full scope of the testing. But this defensive front, it's a very intriguing group, but all of a sudden, those windows on who they could take are closing because they have very specific types that they want. If they expand those types, maybe it becomes a little bit easier. I'm not even advocating for that. I'm just saying they've done this in the past. Brian Gutekunst was in the front office when he saw Ted Thompson do this very thing. So again, I'm not advocating for it. If you go back and look at some of these picks, they weren't great. Like the Jarrell Worthy pick, the Quentin Rollins pick, Demarius Randall, these were not good picks. But we went back through this the other week at, hey, this is the Matt LaFleur draft. This is the Joe Barry draft. They've done this in the past. And in the case of Jeff Hafley, I think he's earned the recognition from this front office to say, hey, look, when you want a player, it's okay to advocate for him, and we will take that under advisement in a way that a year ago, maybe they didn't. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying maybe they didn't. So what does that mean for this group? Well, I'm going to go through some of the testing, Packers types, all that good stuff. We'll do that with the pass rush group. That's next on Locked On Packers. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So here's the other part of what we talked about to open the show. So Isaiah McDuffie, let's say $4 million, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't preclude them from taking a player. Tyron Hopper does not preclude them from taking a player who they could use similarly to the way that they used Clay Matthews early in his career, or the way that they projected to use Clay Matthews when they drafted him. We've had reporting since the draft back in 2009. That when he was drafted, Clay Matthews, they thought, hey, look, we think he has upside rushing the passer, but worst case scenario, he can be an off-ball linebacker for us. Now, in the first round, that's not ideal, but certainly you look at the physical tools and the upside. I mentioned in our mock draft Monday yesterday, Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, 16 and a half sacks, the only pass rusher in this class, defensive tackle or defensive end, to run a sub-7 3-cone, which is one of those telling tests, and 34-inch arms, which again is a huge barometer for teams. Rashawn Gary, almost 6'5", 34 and an eighth inch arms. Ezeraku, 6'2" and change, 248, 34-inch arms. You want to look at density, Clay Matthews was 6'3", 240. Ezeraku, 6'2" and a half, 248. So denser than Clay Matthews, and if you're adjusting for Jeff Hafley, could play some Sam linebacker in base. He's an off-ball linebacker in base and then rushes the passer in sub-package situations while he grows into whatever he can become. Has the frame, has the body to get bigger, even at 6'2" and a quarter or 6'2" and a half. If he can play, get up to, Clay probably got up to 250, 255, but that's at 6'3". Ezeraku 6'2" and change. If he gets up to 255, he will be denser, he will be thicker, don't get weird, than Clay Matthews. And when you look at this class based on just the measurements, Jalen Walker, too small. Jack Sawyer, short arms, like preposterously short arms. Josiah Stewart, we're talking about top 100 kind of players, too small. Kyle Kennard, didn't test well enough. And then you go down the board. Mike Green didn't test and has multiple sexual assault allegations leveled against him. James Pierce is undersized but tested really well. He also has some off-field concerns, some red flag concerns. The Packers have really never, Devontae Wyatt a little bit, but that was just sort of like, he's kind of immature. And I go back to the Bob McGinn quote about him being kind of a turd. Like, I don't know, he was 22. The stuff on Pierce is like he could fall out of the first round kind of stuff. Everybody's hearing it. Bob McGinn was really the only one hearing the Devontae Wyatt stuff. Like he was consistently being mocked in the first round. James Pierce right now is falling out. Princely Umam-Yellen from Ole Miss, a little undersized. And we're talking about a guy that's later on day 2. That's round 3 really. Maybe round 2. Maybe he tested well enough to do that. And the Packers, I think, could be in there. Ashton Gelati, same kind of thing. Borderline size-wise. Would be small for the Packers at tackle. Is he a tackle? Is he an end? That's hard to parse there. Based on the testing, 4 players, just no doubt green light players. Shamar Stewart, who I just don't think is going to be there. Landon Jackson, who interesting player from Arkansas, was playing a lot of 4-eye. So it's muddled as to what his role would be. The Packers have done this before. Rashawn Gary was playing that 4-eye at Michigan. and they bet on the traits. And then Olufemi Oladeju from UCLA, again, former linebacker, became a pass rusher, broke out. I wonder if that's the perfect kind of guy for the Packers. I mean, if you're looking for a dark horse, hey, like no one was talking about him as a first-round pick in February, and then he turned into a first-round pick after testing really well. People love the kid, the work ethic. Brian Gutekunst likes to take guys, 20 picks too early in the first round. That's an interesting one. And then there's guys that didn't test. Michael Williams from Georgia, JTT from Ohio State, and Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. The Packers have never taken a guy in the first round under Brian Gutekunst who did not have a full athletic profile. So if any of these guys decide, Michael Williams decides, hey, you know what, look, I'm just not going to test. Or Mike Green, hey, I'm just not going to test. Okay, that's your choice. You're just not going to be a Packer. That's just the reality right now. So back to the Jeff Hafley part of this. I think Oladeju is someone who I would not have been as open to a month ago. But now that I'm thinking about it, especially in the second round. And then Ezeraku, the connection is obvious. If they're going to give Jeff Hafley some input, a la Isaiah McDuffie, then someone like Ezeraku, who by all accounts is just a terrific kid, hard worker, just loves the game, loves the grind, highly productive player, relative athletic score well above 8. So this is not someone who the Packers are going to go, oh, well, we're betting on production, not athleticism. That's not the deal. 8.28 relative athletic score. Now, Shamar Stewart, 9.99. Landon Jackson, 9.88. James Pierce, 9.35. That's more what the Packers tend to be looking at in the first round. But it wouldn't be out of the question, especially at a need position, especially when you're getting more information. And I think these are lottery tickets. So the more information you have, the more certainty you can glean. At defensive tackle, it's a similar sort of thing where Shamar Turner and Omar Norman Lott, just too small. Jordan Phillips, Alfred Collins, Deion Walker, and Joshua Farmer. Whether it's measurements or testing, just not in the mix. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, Tyleik Williams did not test. I think those guys could be in the mix for the Packers, but they will need to test at some point. The borderline players, Ty Robinson and TJ Sanders. Ty Robinson from Nebraska, TJ Sanders from South Carolina. Size-wise on the fringe, but tested well enough. Only 2 full green defensive tackles. That's Derek Harmon and Darius Alexander. Darius Alexander from Toledo, Derek Harmon from Oregon. I have said, and as of today, if you're going to ask me, I think that still the pick is Derek Harmon. But I think it comes down to Derek Harmon, Donovan Ezeraku. And depending on what happens, I still think receiver is a dark horse here. I still think someone like Jaden Higgins, you're going to start seeing him in first rounds of mock drafts. I'm telling you it's coming. And I think it's something that, depending on how this offseason goes, the Packers have to consider. Whether they will is a separate question, of course, but I think it's something that they will look at based on what I've heard. I think the DK Metcalf conversations have died down. I think Seattle is wanting to hold firm on the line. I don't think the Packers want to overpay. I think they feel like they have options. Because they do. Devontae Adams, potential option. Look, Brandon Ayuk still potentially on the market. They've got stuff that they can look at. Let's talk about the draft receivers and the corners, because I think that's something that the Packers are going to be looking at here too. Let's talk about them next on Locked On Packers. So this cornerback class, still a lot to be determined, because three players that I think would very much be on the Packers' radar. Have not tested. And I don't think Savon Revel is going to, coming off a serious knee injury. He might just not be on the Packers board, frankly. Haven't heard much on Benjamin Morrison, who was in our mock draft Monday yesterday, the Notre Dame corner, who I think has first round tape all day. Perfect fit for the Packers. Those medicals, I'm trying to dig in on that and figure out what the situation is there. And then Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan. There are some questions about his speed. And then he didn't run, didn't test at Indy. Size-wise, no problems. And that's the same for Morrison, the same for Revel. They check the height weight stuff that the Packers tend to care about. Remember, the Packers have not drafted a corner sub 190 with a premium pick since Terrell Buckley. It is just something they are not going to do. I wonder in this draft class, depending on what they're able to, like if they sign DJ Reed, they're probably going to hold fast to their feelings, their models, and say, we're not going to press. We're going to find the guy that we think fits us. There are some guys in this class, though, that are borderline. AZ Thomas, we don't know. This is pending testing. I think he would run fast enough, and hopefully he will at his pro day and will run fast enough. Only did the broad jump. Quincy Riley tested decently well, but small in terms of short. We'll see how much they care about that. Jacob Parrish, same thing. Sub 5'10". The Packers generally do not draft sub 5'10" corners, but in the 190s and tested off the charts. And I like his tape from Kansas State. I really do. I mean, I was watching it going, this is not a Packers type corner, but man, he's good. He's going to be good in the NFL. I like him. Not a great player, but just a solid player. Does not, I mean, there are a lot of players in this draft, frankly, that I'm like, I'm sorry, he ran what? Like Matthew Golden, one of those guys, ran 4.29. Not in a million years watching his tape would I guess he ran 4.29. Not a million years. I mean, he got chased down by multiple guys against Arizona State. I mean, no shade at the Sun Devils, but like, come on. If you're a 4.29 guy, you can't be caught by anybody, much less multiple guys. Give me a break. And then Noah Williams, relative athletic score over 7. If we're talking about a day 3 corner, I think the Packers very much could consider that. Still 6 foot, still, almost 200 pounds. Maxwell Hairston, it's not going to work. At 5'11", low 180s, like the Packers are I just don't think, I think he's going to, after running 4.2s and jumping well, I think he's probably a first round pick, and the Packers are just not going to do that in the first round. Same with Kobe Bryant, just too skinny. Low 180s, just not going to work. So that leaves 3 corners projected to go in the top 100 right now that are Packers types. Jahdae Barron, he runs 4.4 flat, 4.39. Like, I find it hard to believe he's going to make it to 23. And I don't know what position he is. Maybe at 4.39, you go, maybe he's a boundary corner. 5'11", 200 pounds. Like, maybe, could. Did the Packers see him as that? That's a big question. This is the last time we saw a player like this. It was Brian Branch. He didn't test this well, and he fell to the second round. The assumption was before the combine, Brian Branch was like a top 10, top 15 kind of pick. I think Jahdae Barron, in a class where there's not a lot of talent at the top, he ends up in that range. The other 2 guys, green light specials, Trey Amos and Darian Porter. And I think Darian Porter is more of a 3rd round kind of corner. Why did it take him until he was super senior, like a 6th year player before he's even a majority time starter, but at 6'3", to test the way that he did, the skills athletically are off the charts. But that would make me nervous. Like if he's there in the 4th round, yeah, it's a worthy, worst case scenario, you get a great gunner out of him. The Packers, I guess, end of the 3rd round. I think you could justify it if they also added at corner in free agency. Like you sign a Paulson Adebo, you sign a DJ Reed, and then you drafted Darian Porter. That works. Because worst case scenario, you've added a starting corner and a special teams ace. Trey Amos is the guy to me. that I really like. Solid player. You don't need to swing for the fences. There isn't really a swing for the fences kind of corner in this draft. I don't think. That will be available to the Packers. Maybe Benjamin Morrison. But if Benjamin Morrison falls to 23, it's because the medicals are iffy. And I just don't think the Packers are going to be in for that. Maybe they are. Maybe they trade up. Maybe Will Johnson falls because he runs, 4-5-5. And maybe the Packers in this defense, they want to play a bunch of cover 3. They don't care. They just think, hey, look, all the good plays, we're willing to live with that. The receivers are interesting as well because every receiver in the top 100 that the Packers size-wise could be interested in, basically, tested like Packers. Now, we got a host of guys like Ted McMillan, who didn't run, who didn't test. So that's part of this too. We don't know what that would look like, but like Jaden Higgins showed out. Jack Bech didn't run the 40, but blazed a 3-cone. Now, that's probably a bad news. He didn't run the 40, but if he goes out and he runs sub 4.6 at his pro day, he's fine. Pat Bryant ran 4.6 flat. That's Dontavian Wicks. You got to run a 3-cone at your pro day, and it's got to be sub 7. Pat Bryant on day 3 with a guy like Devontae Adams that you draft, I'm all good with that. That makes your room better. I wonder about Jalen Noel because it's 5'10 and a half, but in the 190s and just tested off the charts. Could you justify it if you're the Packers going, hey, look, he's there at 55 and maybe he won't be. But let's say he is. Hey, Jaden Reed, you got to figure out if you can play him outside. Just add a dynamic playmaker to your team. Now, I think Jaden Higgins, his teammate, is a cleaner fit. Is he the kind of player in the first round you would consider? To me, yeah. I think Jaden Higgins is a first round talent. 6'4", 214, runs 4.47, jumps 38. Nearly an 11-foot broad jump at his size. You watch him, his release package for someone his size is outrageous. I mean, there's only a handful of guys in the league at 6'4" who can release at the line of scrimmage, create separation fast the way that he can. I think he's a first-round player. But all these guys, you look at Torrey Horton from Colorado State, day 3. There's these guys on, the Tennessee kid, Dante Thornton, Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech, day 3 guys. Like anyone that they could have been into before, they're into now. So there's a lot of depth in this receiver class that I think that they can take advantage of. But that's why, I think if you're the Packers, you can go, hey, look, Devontae Adams, let's bring him home. And then take your shot. 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round with this receiver class. Trey Harris didn't run great at 6'2" and change, 205. But ran well enough, 4.55. So if he's there in the 80s for the Packers, I love that for them. Tough physical runner, reminds me of Juwan Jennings. Someone who can on 3rd down, like with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, how many times on 3rd down did the 49ers throw to Juwan Jennings? You want to talk about a bucket getter. He was that guy. And I think Trey Harris can do that. I think he's a very good fit for the Packers. People talking about, first round. It's like, I don't see that personally. And the opinions on him are pretty wide. Could he be a borderline first round player? Is he more like could he fall to late round 3? This is that kind of class where you just kind of don't know where they're going to go because one team might like a player early 2nd, another team might like him late 3rd. That's just the way that this class is because the difference in quality between the 20th best player and the 60th best player and the 80th best player is marginal. This is going to be a wild draft as a result. Like the Packers are going to probably take someone in the 1st round that you go, I'm sorry, what? Or in the 2nd round that you go, I'm sorry, what? Or in the 3rd round that you go, I'm sorry, what? But that's just the way that this draft is with this group of players. And who knows? Maybe because I'm saying that, because this draft is a weird draft, Like all of a sudden they'll just go chalk, chalk, chalk. Best player available, best player available. Like it'll be Mel Kiper's best player available and the Packers take him. I doubt it, but who knows? All right, back tomorrow as we get closer to opening the new league year. Could a trade be coming? Devontae Adams? What's the situation in New York? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff coming up. Packers free agents. They signed Isaiah McDuffie. There's potentially more to come. Brandon McManus, TJ Slayton. There's other guys that they got to figure out. So we'll dive into that as we look forward to the new league year, free agency, all that fun stuff. That's coming up. Follow me on the social medias, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on the social medias. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. Of course, on YouTube, so you can stay locked on Packers.